Inspired Talks. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suray Sachit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. We have been discussing Vedanta. Vedanta, as Swamiji explained to his students who had joined him at Thousand Island Park. Today, I decided to have a quick look on the the foundation of Vedanta. Why Vedanta? And what exactly it does? And for that matter, exactly what Vedanta is. According to Vedanta, which is the most powerful spiritual philosophy in the world, man is divine. Not only man is divine, nothing exists which is not divine. So, starting from a blade of grass to the highest being that there might be, everything is divine. The term used is Brahman. But we don't realize that truth. We very well know that we are bound. We know that we have bodies, we have mind, we have our affections, and we have our emotions, we have our bondages. Vedanta says that this is because of ignorance, ajnana. What exactly is ajnana? Those of you who might have listened to talks on Vedanta here and there might have come across these terms, ajnana and avidya. Both essentially mean ignorance, and ignorance technically means not knowing your true self. Naturally, the question arises, how do you say that I don't know my true self? I very well know I am Swami Samarpanananda and I am sitting here talking to you. Vedanta says that if you do not have this realization and full consciousness that you are Brahman, you are divine, you are infinite, and that all powers are within you, all knowledge is within you, then you are in ajnana, you are under ignorance. To explain this idea, what's the relationship between this Brahman, pure consciousness, and ignorance, the world? Shankaracharya wrote a very beautiful introduction on adhyas, superimposition. Superimposition in his work on Brahma Sutra. We had mentioned it in the previous talk, Brahma Sutra. Swamiji is talking from that in these inspired talks. I just thought that we will have a quick look on what exactly Acharya Shankara has written, because Swamiji is explaining that. So whether you use the term avidya or ajnana, that is ignorance, Acharya Shankar, while explaining Advaita Vedanta, he says that this is because of superimposition. That means the transformation is not real, the forgetfulness is not real, nor it is fake, nor it is imagined. Actually, it is superimposition. And his famous words, which we had mentioned in the previous talk, was Yusmat Asmat Pratyaya Gochar. And then Vishay Visayino. Vishay and Vishayino. There is subject, there is object. And there is Yusmat Pratyaya. That is the intelligence within our mind about the external world. And Asmat Pratyaya, the intelligence, the understanding within us about myself. That is, in very simple terms, it means here is this pen. I know that I am seeing this pen. That means two ideas are being formed in my mind simultaneously. The first idea is of me who is seeing, and the second one is this pen, which is the object which is being seen by me. And simply he says that these two pratyaya means the consciousness, the awareness. You can simply awareness, because consciousness generally is used for super consciousness, that is the ultimate consciousness. So we can say that awareness, this awareness of I and you, that is me and this world, everything in this world is that objectified. So this idea of there being a subject which is me and object which is this world, it runs concurrently, and yet these two ideas can never be one, because we are always conscious that, see, supposing when you are taking food, you know that you are different from food. Similarly, the idea connected with you and food, that is also different. Now, they being eternally opposed, we all know, even if you see it from the standpoint of grammar, you will know that subject and object, these are two entirely different things. Now, they being different, and Acharya Shankar uses beautiful expression. He says, Tama Prakasavat. They are as different as light and darkness. As light can never be darkness and darkness can never be light, just like that, subject can never be object and object can never be subject. Which means that the knowledge of the object that comes within us can never be us. That means this pen can never be me, nor the knowledge of this pen can ever be me. Because this every time I'm getting this knowledge that I am knowing, the real knowledge belongs to Atman. Real consciousness belongs to Atman. Now, when you say that, here is this pen, I know this pen. Every time we talk of knowledge, knowledge actually belongs to I-ness. So this pen can never be one with that I-ness. It's basically very simple, but many of you might be listening it for the first time, so it may be slightly difficult for you to grasp. So he says that there being nothing common between me and, say, this pen, these two can never be one. Obviously, because to be one, there has to be some common point, some commonality, some meeting point. Now, there is no meeting point between me and this pen, because they are absolutely non-identical. They have no identity of any kind where they can meet. So there is no meeting point. And yet, in this world, we find that all the time, wherever you look, whenever you look, you will find that there is always the mixing between the subject and object. How? Through knowledge. It's through knowledge that subject and object get mixed up. We will be discussing more of this. This mixing up of subject and object, that means this mixing of me, I, with the world in such a way that you cannot distinguish between the two, is going on all the time in this world. We will be explaining this in a minute. This mixing up, this is superimposition, and this is due to ajnana. This is due to ignorance. Sometimes this is also known as mithya jnana, viparita jnana. Mithya jnana is false knowledge. Viparita jnana is knowing something opposite. The idea is that subject and object, technically, they are eternally different, and yet they keep mixing all the time as far as our worldly affairs are concerned. And naturally, the question arises, what exactly is superimposition? What exactly you mean by superimposition? Now, when you get into philosophy, that includes Vedanta and any other philosophy of India, every time you come up with a term, every time you come up with an idea, you will have to explain that term, that idea in very clear terms. According to Vedanta, now when we are speaking Vedanta, here I mean what Acharya Shankara has said. Because if you go by what Ramanuja says, it will be slightly different. And if you go by what Madhva says, it will be different. Then there are other schools of Vedanta, they define it differently. According to Acharya Shankar, he says, Smriti Rupa Paratra Purvadrisht Avabhasaha. You you have seen something, or you have experienced something earlier, and now you recall that, and you put on something which is there. Technically, it is translated as unreal manifestation. This is unreal manifestation of something previously experienced or perceived, and which is of the nature of remembrance. This is a very important point. It is of the nature of remembrance on something else. And in Sanskrit, it has been expressed just in two terms: Smriti Rupaha. Smriti is of the form of memory. Paratra, you saw something earlier. Paratra Purva Drishta Avhasa. You saw something, you experienced something in the past. Now you are bringing up that knowledge and presenting it on something else. The best example, they say, when you mistake a rope for a snake in semi darkness, you have some knowledge of snake from the past. Now you bringing up that knowledge, that remembrance, and that remembrance and putting it on rope. Sorry, actually, we have some disturbance on the computer. So it is of the nature of remembrance. Every time we are talking about agyan, ignorance, superimposition, it is of the nature of remembrance. Remembrance of something from the past and applying it on the present. It has very deep connotations. Its implications are very deep. If you go on thinking on this, you will realize what Maya is, and how deeply it affects us. For example, there is a mother who loves her baby, her son, who has grown up, or her daughter, and she remembers their mutual love from the past. And now the behavior has changed, that son's behavior has changed. Now she is still in that bondage. Why? Because memory of past affection is coming in the present and is tying her up. This is Maya. Just like that, you can go on applying it anywhere. Something happened in the past, which might have been good or bad. For example, sometimes you had traumatic experiences, and you come across some word, some expression, and suddenly your mind goes to that, and you get a panic attack. The cases of panic attack, wherever there is the psychological problem of panic attack, it is caused entirely due to this Maya, which is adhyas, and according to Shankara, it is unreal manifestation. It's unreal manifestation of previously remembering it. Is that the only way that superimposition can be explained? No, there are many other ways. And different schools of philosophy explain this superimposition differently. Shankara gives a list of it. He says, number one, when you superimpose attribute of one thing, that is quality of one thing, on the other. For example, sometimes we say that this person is as beautiful as a moon. Attributes are becoming common. And then somewhere for example, there is also this the case of transference. Transference means, supposing you loved your papa, your father, when you were young, and your father passed away. Much later you come across somebody who has something common about your father, and then you superimpose that on that person, and you become attached to that person. This is also Maya, because some attribute is common. Then there is some kind of confusion. It's based on inability to discriminate. You cannot distinguish between the superimposed thing and on which superimposition has been made. This inability, you are not able to distinguish. This is happening all the time with us, and we will be seeing more of this. And there is fictitious assumption in a thing of attributes is a fictitious, it's not there, and yet you are imagining things. Now, whatever your definition of adhyas, whether it is attribute getting superimposed on each other, or there is some kind of confusion, or there is sheer imagination, these things do not matter. The bottom line is that generally, wherever there is this kind of superimposition, the technical term is adhyas, there is an unreal assumption. There's some kind of unreal assumption about the attributes of one thing on the other. You say, this is very, very, very important term. If you want to understand Vedanta, one has to understand this. There is unreal assumption about something on on some object which does not have that. So when we confuse between, say, snake and rope, same problem is there. Snake has certain attributes. You are superimposing it on a rope because of your ignorance, because there is no light, or you don't know. And you'll find that kids who do not have storehouse of knowledge, they keep on confusing between different things. So they imagine lots of things. They see something and they go on imagining, they go on making stories and narrating. As far as our own experiences are concerned, we see such things all the time. The famous example they use is, there is this mother of pearl, Shuktika, that is oyster kind of thing. In semi-darkness, people confuse it with silver. And there are many, many more such examples. And the favorite example of Vedanta is snake and rope. Now the question comes that, okay, fine, we understand that there can be some kind of superimposition. We might confuse snake and rope, but confusing this world on soul, which is pratyagatma, my soul is pure consciousness, and this world is pure matter. How can matter be superimposed on consciousness? Because pratyagatman, the soul, the atman, it is a non-object. If you say something is common, that common has to be between two objects. For example, you take some iron ball which is made red hot or simply hot, and you put it in water. Now, attribute of one gets transferred to the attribute of the other. So water becomes hot. These things can happen where there are objects. But how can attributes go from object to subject? Because Atman is subject. Asmat Pratyaya. Acharya Shankara answers that as far as extreme sense is concerned, the way we carry ourselves, the way we treat ourselves, you cannot say that Atman is absolutely non-object. No, you cannot. Why you cannot say? Because the moment you use the word asmat, which essentially means the sense of I-ness, the idea that I am the subject, the moment you say that I have this idea that I am a subject, that itself implies that it has become an object. Swamiji will explain it beautifully, that even when you have to know yourself, you objectify yourself. This objectification, see, after reading so much of these scriptures and being into it for years now, I definitely have formed some idea about what Atman is and what my true identity is. But never in 24 hours I can carry myself with that idea that I am Atman. Whenever I think of myself, that I-ness always becomes objectified. And this is where Acharya Shankara catches. He says that indeed, there is no doubt that Atman is pure consciousness, Atman is subject, and yet when it comes to our daily life, when you push it to the extreme, as far as extreme sense is concerned, it becomes objectified, no doubt about it. And as far as universal self is concerned, Atman is concerned, it is well known that people do experience that. It's not that you don't experience it. When you go to Samadhi, you do experience Atman. So it's not that it cannot be experienced. The idea is that there is some commonality. Swamiji will explain it slightly differently, as we shall see soon enough. So, and the genius that Acharya Shankara was, he says that there is no hard and fast rule that this superimposition has to be only on something which is before my eyes. To give you an example, no one has seen sky. You, me, anyone, no one knows what sky is. The sky, which is up above. And yet we say that sky is curved. Sky is not curved. And yet we say sky is curved. You have not seen, no one has experienced sky. Similarly, you say sky is dirty. Sky is never dirty. When you say sky is cloudy, sky never can get cloudy. Clouds may be trailing there. Sky can never get cloudy. How can it? And yet no one has seen sky. And we are continuously using these terms. When you go to things like electrons, protons, etc., there also these things happen. You keep on superimposing the ideas on things which are not even before your eyes. So this thing, you cannot say that, how can you superimpose the ideas concerning world on something which is not before us, that is, which is not objectified. So superimposition of non-self on the universal is not inconsistent. It's not that it cannot happen. It can happen, and it does happen. Now this superimposition is known as avidya. When you are superimposing the traits, the attributes of the object on the subject, which is Atman. And yet this subject never gets affected. Atman never gets affected by the attributes of the object. That means even when you are superimposing the idea of snake on a rope, the rope does not become venomous. The trait of the rope continues to be what exactly it was. Similarly, if you confuse a snake with a rope, the trait of the snake will not change. It will continue to be poisonous. Simply because you are putting attributes on one thing of something other, that does not mean that it will undergo any change. Which means Atman never undergoes any change. Surprisingly, says Acharya Shankar uses a beautiful expression in Sanskrit, iterator adhyas. Itar, which means that translated in English, it becomes a reciprocal superimposition. Vedanta is actually not that difficult. But if you have some idea about certain basic things, you will really love it. Says, it's not only that there is superimposition of, say, a snake on a rope. As far as subject and object are concerned, there is a reciprocal superimposition. Not only that object gets superimposed on the subject also, Atman also gets superimposed on the object. We shall see how Swamiji looks at it. It's a beautiful thing. And all the worldly affairs, our conduct in this world, and also our religious conduct, these are carried out strictly because of this reciprocal superimposition. We are superimposing the world on the soul, and we are superimposing the soul on the world. This reciprocal superimposition makes our worldly conduct as also our religious conduct. Oh, this is objectionable. How can you say that? It's a very simple thing. That a jnani, person who has realized the self, for example, take the case of Sri Ramakrishna, who knew that who is beyond body and mind. They never acted in any particular way. It's not only that the scriptures say like that, it actually happens. So somewhere you find that persons who have known Atman, persons who have realized Atman, they lose the sense of I-ness. They lose the complete sense of their identification with body and mind. So they never get into any act of the world. But as far as why? Says unless there is some purpose to be fulfilled, even a foolish person does not get involved in some act. There's a very famous expression that Acharya Shankar uses. Without a purpose, without some motive, even a fool doesn't get into an act. A jnani, a person who has realized that he is Atman, he realizes that no purpose of his is going to be served in this world, and hence he never engages in any kind of activity, which implies that the activities that are being carried out in this world by anybody, they are being carried out by people who are ignorant. And by ignorant, it means who are under superimposition. Because for whom superimposition is gone, they never act in this world. And as far as says that nobody ever acts or is concerned with a mere body. Simply because there is a body, they are not going to act. That idea of self has to be there. I am this body. Unless you have this idea that I am this body, unless you have this idea that I am this mind, you will not act. As far as persons with self-knowledge is concerned, they give up that idea, they go beyond that idea, so they never act. So then he gets into more technicality. He says, as far as pramana, that is valid means of knowledge is concerned, they also lose any meaning for them, for such people, because they don't need that. They don't need to know anything from this world, those who have realized. Now, as far as common man is concerned, he uses such a simple logic. He gives the example of a cow. Says, if you take green grass towards a cow, the cow will come towards you. And if you raise a stick, the cow will move away from you. The cow very clearly knows that I can get that. That is seeking. And if there is a stick, I need to avoid. Now, when you look at this world, you find that each one of us, all of us, we tend to move towards our sought after things. And we try to move away from things that we don't want, we don't like. As far animals are concerned, we very clearly say that the animals do not have a high sense of knowledge. It's a very common thing. Everybody says, everybody knows. We say we are evolved. We say we are mentally evolved. And as far as animals are concerned, we say that they are not that evolved. But when it comes to behaving in this world, our behavior is absolutely the same as animals. So how do you say that you're in any way superior to these animals? Because animals also are into seeking and avoiding. And we human beings, we are also into seeking and avoiding. But not these Jnani Purush. Self-realized persons, they don't behave that way. Because no purpose of theirs gets served there. Because the animals and insects, they cannot discriminate properly. They behave in certain ways. And we are also just like that. We cannot discriminate properly, and we continuously fall in that pit of ignorance. The bottom line is that every worldly affair that we conduct, every worldly affair is under ignorance. In no way we are separate from the animals as far as our day-to-day affairs are concerned, as far as our worldly affairs are concerned. Now, when it comes to scriptures, it says that all secular and religious, When you go to scriptures, whatever scripture, say the Vedas or Quran or Bible, they're talking about taking you somewhere. They say that if you live a righteous life, if you lead a good life, you will go to the heaven. Same in Islam and same in Christianity too. Now, supposing there is a person who knows that he is one with the universal self, he is one with the entire universe, where will he go? He doesn't have any place to go. Now, naturally, he will not be following the injunctions of the scriptures. It's such a simple argument. You go to a hotel to stay, and somebody says that room is better. You can move to that room. Naturally, you will move. But if you have a huge house and that house belongs to you, you know about every room, and then you don't have to keep on moving because the whole thing belongs to you. We we have confined ourselves, we have narrowed down ourselves so terribly to this small existence of ours that we are always seeking for something better. But one who knows that everything belongs to him, he will not be seeking any such thing. So all the religious activities, very often nowadays people ask us, we have this kind of problem. What should I be doing? Which mantra I should be chanting? The problem is that you think that your limited existence is confined to something which is not conducive to your happiness, to your growth. So you want to get something better. But a person who has realized his self, realized his universal self, he never does it. And theoretically, he's not supposed to do it. So the shastras, the scriptures, the Vedas, etc., they talk about things which are of interest only to people of a limited understanding. And that is why when you go through the Vedas, all these sacrifices, etc., and the prayers, etc., those of you who might have gone through some of these prayers, you will know that they'll say that, oh Lord, I am poor. For example, there is that Christian prayer, give us our daily bread. You are hungry, so you want bread. But one who knows that he is one with the Lord, will he be asking anything like this? Obviously not. So that scripture is meant for persons who want bread and who consider themselves different from God. For others, this prayer is of no use. For others, I don't mean people who do not have bread because they will have other kind of wants. But people who are identified with God, they will not be asking for any such thing. So ultimately, superimposition, this ajnana, ignorance, this is under certain conditions. And Acharya Shankara beautifully lists them. He says, when a person superimposes his self on something external, a person may have kids, wife or husband, then you superimpose. How you superimpose? Well, if my family is happy, I am happy. Some time ago, I came across one gentleman and he was telling that his father was in bad shape. And unfortunately, gentleman died. Said, well, if father is healthy, I will be fine. And if father is not well, I will not be well. Same thing about, I know of many of my friends who are so identified with their kids that they're always worrying that if they are not well, I am not well. So you are identifying your I-ness with something external. And then there is identifying yourself with the body. This is the second stage where you say that I am fat, I am lean, I am fair, I am dark. Sometimes you go deeper and you identify yourself with your senses. Somebody says, I am deaf, I am squint eyed, I have, I am blind, things like that. And ultimately, you identify yourself with the mind where you say that I want this, you have this desire, you have this intention, and things like this. Here, superimposition is expressing itself as ego, not I-ness. And this ego gets identified with the universal self, and this universal self is also getting identified with the ego. This is what we mentioned by reciprocal superimposition. That idea of I is getting identified with these external things and some of these internal organs. Thus, we realize that this superimposition, this intermixing of I and you, that sense of I-ness, sense of you-ness, this is beginningless and endless. And it is of the nature of erroneous conception. When I personally became monk, for some time, even though I had become monk, and that was when I was pretty young, so I was quite curious about how my college performed in this sports event and that sports event. Just to get news through friends and through newspapers. And now, of course, that's gone. Sometimes that news comes, oh, watch, it's like that. So the distance has come. Initially, you have identification, and slowly there is a distance, and that is when you enjoy it more. So there is this erroneous conception where I identify with some object, and it promotes the notion of self as an agent, as an experiencer. I'm that universal self, and yet I feel I'm this body, I am lean, I am fat, I am squint eyed, I am deaf. This family is mine, I am theirs. Now, this kind of identification is perceived by all. This is beginningless, and it's a natural process. There's nothing unnatural about it. What a Vedanta does is it gets down to cutting down this identification, this ignorance, the ignorance that is caused by superimposition. Now, this is something, if you are interested in Vedanta, this is what we need to understand. What is this ignorance? Is the ignorance that makes us forget our true nature. It is ignorance. It is pure ignorance that makes us be one with this world. What is the process of that ignorance? Superimposition. There is that object, and here is the subject. Object superimposes on the subject. In turn, subject superimposes on the object, as we mentioned just now. And the game begins. Vedanta does not teach us something new. Where began this superimposition? It's beginningless. No one knows. To whom it comes? To everyone. No one is an exception. In what form? It can come in any form. See, I belong to the Ramakrishna mission. I gave up my family, my parents, my brother, sister. But now I'm identified with my organization. If something good happens with my organization, I feel happy. Call it avidya, call it agyan, call it maya, call it superimposition. It won't go away till you realize your true self. You can give up your home, you can give up this, you can give up that. But in one form or the other, superimposition will keep coming to you. This is the basic idea about superimposition that Swamiji is talking. And from here, we take over. We had just mentioned that Swamiji was discussing that matter and external world are but the soul in a certain state. Now, Acharya Shankar has not yet talked that thing. Those things will be discussed later in Brahma Sutra, when Swamiji is summing up the thing. And if we have to understand Shankaracharya, we need to read Swami Vivekananda. That's the best way to understand Vedanta. And Swamiji says, the world is God and is real, but that is not the world we see. In reality, the objective world is also God, but we don't see it that way. We see it as objects separated from us. Just as we see silver in the mother of pearl, where it is not. A superimposition, just we mentioned just now. This is what is known as adhyas or superimposition, that is, a relative existence dependent upon a real one, as when we recall a scene we have seen, for the time it exists for us, but that existence is not real. You recall a scene, but that goes away. No, that's not a real scene. Just like that, you recall some past experience and you put it on the present. The experience comes from the past, it is pasted on the present, and then it is presented before us. And we get totally confused between that which is being presented and that which is real. Or some say it as when we imagine heat in water which does not belong to it, as Acharya was explaining the different kinds of adhyas. So really it is something which has been put where it does not belong. Swamiji uses a different expression, makes things easy. What? That which has been put where it does not belong. You love somebody and that person has moved away from you. Your love is misplaced. You are putting love where it does not belong. You are attracted to something. You expect something from others. Those of you who are working in some companies, etc., you will see that you have certain expectations. And those expectations do not get fulfilled by the higher ups. You feel sad. Why do you feel sad? You feel sad because your expectations are misplaced. This is Maya. So really it's something which has been put where it doesn't belong, taking the thing for what it is not. This is Maya. We take things that which is not. Vedanta gets down to explaining that learn to take things as they are. And this is not possible. See, if you go through these books that are written on power of positivity and self-improvement books, things like that, you'll always come across such expressions, but these are not possible. You can go on teaching yourself, you can go on reminding yourself, you can go on practicing these things, but actually do not work. When the real time comes, when the real test comes, we fail. Because till you have experienced Atman, till you have known Atman, these problems will persist. I have experienced this kind of misplaced trust, misplaced love 1,000 times. And even now, I bungle up. I expect certain behavior from people, knowing very well that I shouldn't be expecting. And I stumble. I feel bad. Because there's a very simple thing that this is what is expected. We see reality, but distorted by the medium through which we see it. Each one of us is seeing the reality when we see the world. The problem is not with the world. The problem is not with people. The problem is with the medium through which that knowledge is coming. That means the problem is here. Agyan, where is Agyan? Here. Agyan is not outside. The medium through which that knowledge of reality comes, that medium is distorted. Because the medium is distorted, whole thing gets distorted. If you are looking at the stars and galaxies through a defective telescope, the images that you get will be defective. So you can never know yourself except as objectified. When I had first read this thing, except as objectified, I'd like this sentence, no doubt. It was much later that I came across psychological studies where it has conclusively proved that the way we see and judge others as objects, as something external. We see and judge ourselves too in the same process, exactly in the same process. And that is why we always have wrong notions about ourselves. To give you an example, you might have heard a beautiful expression that very successful people, very successful, those who are great, great, great achievers, I mean the genuine, particularly those who are into the field of knowledge, they become humble. Their humility is not fake, their humility is true, absolutely true. You know why? Because they remember, they know themselves to be what they are. For example, the famous statement by Richard Feynman, where he said, he is no genius. He used to say he was no genius. Although his biography, written by James Gleick, its name is Genius. James Gleick, he was also a good scientist. And he wrote the biography of Richard Feynman, named it Genius. Richard Feynman himself never said, he said that he only was deep into a particular subject. Now, when he's deep into a particular subject, the onlookers know that his depth is so huge that it cannot be compared with others. They consider him a genius. Feynman himself did not consider himself a genius. Same with Einstein. Einstein never considered himself a genius. He, he thought that he is deep into it. Similarly, when you will say that people who are arrogant, people who are too proud of themselves, same problem comes. When I am talking to you, I'm continuously making an appraisal of you, and you are making a continuous appraisal of me. I have a body language, I have facial expressions. Through that, you are knowing too many things. But when I judge myself, my body language, my facial expressions are not coming to me, which means that I am getting a very, very limited knowledge of myself. Because I get a limited knowledge of myself simply because to me, I myself is an object. When I know myself, that itself is an objectified knowledge. That being an objectified knowledge, understanding of myself is extremely distorted compared to what others say. Sometimes people say, do you know me more than I know myself? Indeed, everyone knows you better than what you know yourself. That is why, there's a very famous saying. If you really want a student to be very good, you need to have a very good teacher. A mediocre teacher will always make students mediocre. If you really want your ward to be great, you need to have a very good teacher. I had read somewhere about a high school mathematics teacher in some European country. I'm forgetting, I read it long ago. 20 of his students got Nobel Prize. Imagine. We don't have 20 Nobel Prizes in India. It's around 20, or maybe number might be slightly more or less. And the teacher was so great. 20 of his students had got Nobel Prize in physics, chemistry, etc. Because teachers know the potential of students. Students themselves do not know. It's not about judging others. It's about knowing the potential. More important is knowing ourselves. So we always see ourselves wrongly, even in our greatness, as also in our limitedness. Sometimes we have a bloated idea of ourselves, but that is because of the limitedness. When we mistake one thing for another, we always take the thing before us as the real, never the unseen. Thus, we mistake the object for the subject. We are continuously mistaking the object for the subject, as we mentioned how we think that I am fat, I am lean, things like that. That is, when I think of myself, I myself become an object. And because I myself become an object, you forget that actually I am the subject. This creates a lot of confusion, and it is caused because of deadly superimposition. The Atman never becomes the object. Now, when we were discussing the idea of superimposition at the beginning, there the question was raised: how can there be superimposition between the object and subject? And Acharya Shankar had beautifully explained that this universal self, although that is never an object, but when it comes to our idea as subject, there we have a very clear idea of I-ness, and it is known as asmat pratyaya. The term is asmat pratyaya, the idea that it is me. But there also it becomes an object. Swamiji here has very beautifully says that when we know ourselves as an object. This is what Acharya Shankar also told there. That actually, as far as if you take it very deep, you will see that it does become an object, but in this form, not in the real form. Atman is beyond subject and object. Atman is neither a subject nor it is an object in the ultimate sense. So, the Atman never becomes the object. Mind is the internal sense. The outer senses are its instruments. In the subject is a trifle of the objectifying power that enables him to know I am. But the subject is the object of its own self, never of the mind or the senses. That knowledge of I-ness, it doesn't come through senses or mind, it's to itself. You can, however, superimpose one idea on another, as when we say the sky is blue, which we mentioned. The sky itself being only an idea. The sky is an idea. Sky is not something real. It's space. It's an idea. And yet we are superimposing, as Acharya mentioned. It's not that you have to know something or you have to be in proximity with something to superimpose the ideas. Science and nescience, there are, but the self is never affected by any nescience. This ignorance never affects. There is no way. Even the slightest thing. Sometimes the example used in Vedanta is that you may see a mirage in a desert, and the water of that mirage, however large that mirage, it can never make even a particle of that sand wet. Relative knowledge is good because it leads to absolute knowledge, but neither the knowledge of the senses, nor of the mind, nor even of the Vedas is true, since they are all within the realm of relative knowledge. So the knowledge that we acquire, as Acharya had mentioned, that all our worldly activities and all our religious activities are carried out within the realm of this avidya. Swamiji is using the term relative knowledge. Absolute knowledge is only of Atman. Relative knowledge is of the world and of the scriptures. Scriptures also belong to relative knowledge, as Acharya Shankar has beautifully explained. Every injunction of scripture, of every religion of the world, they discuss only the relative world, the relative truth. Absolute truth, no. It's beyond them. They cannot. So, first, get rid of the delusion, I am the body. Then only can we want real knowledge. Who can go for Vedanta? Only one who has gone beyond the attractions of the body. We are so attracted to our own bodies, and at times attracted towards the body of others, that knowledge of Vedanta, knowledge of religion, is practically impossible for us. Man's knowledge is only a higher degree of brute knowledge. So, you see what Acharya Shankar had beautifully explained, that what animals do, that is avoiding and seeking, we also do all the time. Now, this is the beauty of Swamiji. Swamiji expresses these things in his own words. And then these words come to us as quotable quotes. Man's knowledge is only a higher degree of brute knowledge. Although we take pride in what we have achieved and we take pride in what we know and things like that, but if you go deeper, you will realize that our knowledge is only a higher degree of brute knowledge, nothing more than that. True knowledge, that comes only when you realize Atman, you know Atman. So, well, and that is, we had some discussion of the first steps of Vedanta. Mind it, this is not the ultimate. This is the first step of Vedanta. If you want to understand Vedanta, you have to understand what is ignorance. Acharya Shankar beautifully says that the goal of Vedanta, he says, that goal of Vedanta is to destroy this cause of all evil. Evil, ignorance. And it comes to us in the form of superimposition. The goal of Vedanta is to destroy that. And for acquiring the knowledge of the unity of the self, the term is Atmaikvatva, oneness of Atman. That is the purpose of Vedanta. And from that point begins Vedanta. It is from this point that Vedanta begins. What we discussed was not the end, it was just the first step of Vedanta. Well, so our time is up. Let's stop here because topic changes after this. Thank you so much.